I'm sitting here today with Steve Smith of HTK Structural Engineers. Steve is Phoenix's very own consulting engineer, and he's been kind enough to talk to me today about Phoenix Homes and his perspective on our unique design that makes it possible to create a true non-combustible home. And Steve, welcome, and thanks for taking this time.
Yeah, thank you. I'm happy to be here with you today, Laurie.
Great, great. Thanks, Steve. So I was trying to remember how we met, and I think it was when I was designing homes for the survivors of the Santa Rosa fire, the Tubbs
Oh,
fire, right?
that's right.
Back in 2018.
Yeah.
And that was my first foray into, well, fire rebuilds for one thing, and doing an all steel home.
Mhm.
And I needed an engineer that was familiar with steel. And I had remembered you from a previous life when I was employed, I think, even before I started my own practice in 2004. So really long time ago. I think we go way back.
Yeah.
And so I got you on board to help me with those homes in Santa Rosa. And that was actually the first time that I used the roof panel
Mhm.
that we're using in Phoenix. And so naturally, when we started developing Phoenix, you were the first engineer I thought of. So could you take us a second and tell us about, your career and your experience in structural design and how you got here?
Yeah, sure. So I actually went to University of California at San Diego, and got a degree in structural engineering specifically. And this firm that I work for now, HTK, hired me a week out of school. And yeah, I've been here the whole time, and now I'm one of the principals here. So in a way, I feel really lucky, to kind of have had a career with the same firm for, over 20 years.
No kidding. That is really great. And I think that that's why you guys provide such solid service too, because you have a really well-established team, and that's super important.
Yep, yep, that is true.
That's great. Um, and so, I think that what was tricky about finding an engineer for Phoenix, and why I'm so glad that you were able to get on board, is that we have these dual roles. So not only are you the structural engineer for our Phoenix homes themselves, but you are also the structural engineer for our patent pending Phoenix beam
Mhm.
that makes up our roof and floor framing system. Um, so when I first started, I mean, this was really hard to kind of explain to people. When I first started explaining this to you, what were some of your thoughts, and were you kind of in your head like, oh my God, this sounds crazy? Or, what were some of your first impressions?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, I didn't think it sounded crazy, but I was a little skeptical. We have, like you mentioned, we had been involved with you before on some, non-combustible style framing, and we've done it with type one, residences with other architects as well. And we just kind of seems like we would run into, roadblocks, right? And so when you first started explaining it to me, that's immediately where my mind went, right? Is, well, where's the roadblock going to be? But honestly, the more we looked into it, through the design of the, like you said, the patent pending beam, I mean, it started to click. It started to make more and more sense. So, I mean, at this point, I think we're definitely onto something.
Whoa, wait a second. You said you've done a type one home before for people? What was that about? Did they wind up building it?
Yeah, so we've designed at least one that I can think of for sure. When the fires came through San Diego years ago, somebody decided they wanted a completely non-combustible home, and they wanted to do it all out of concrete. So all of the walls were concrete, the roof was concrete, interior walls, everything was concrete. And I mean, the problem with it, it was just too expensive. It never got built. So yeah, that I mean, we've probably run across that a handful of times, and I honestly can't think of one that actually got built.
Well, and see, and that's what that's part, it's like what I tell people is anything's possible.
Mhm.
So when we say we can't do that, it's not that we can't do it. It's that it becomes so expensive that it's no longer feasible.
Exactly.
And so when we say with PHNX, we are the first non-combustible net zero home in the nation, it's really because this is the first one that's feasible. And then I do have a question for you. So when you say it was type 1, do you know if it was actually permitted as type 1?
So honestly, we didn't deal with the permitting specifically. I can't say for 100% sure that it was, permitted under type 1. I do believe we looked at the hour rating on the walls and the roof structure, which basically with concrete construction, the way you get that hour rating is how much concrete cover you have on your rebar. Which is
Right.
also part of the reason why it was expensive, right? Because you need to add more concrete in order to get those kind of ratings.
Well, yeah, and see, and that's, so the trick is really getting that approval for type 1A, which is the most non-combustible, the highest fire rated type of construction that you can do per code, right?
Mhm.
And because I think what people don't realize is even if they build an ICF home, they could build an ICF home, they could build it with steel,
Mhm.
you know, but they're not going to have that type 1A permitted rating unless they go and they do a bunch of other stuff too. And they have to make sure that the floors are 2-hour rated and the ceilings are 1.5-hour rated and the windows. So this is something people forget too. Are you going to build this concrete home and then put a bunch of vinyl windows in that melt?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they melt, and then all of the stuff that you did. So that's the thing about getting it actually permitted as a type 1A. It's really the only way that we can ensure our clients that they can be sure that they are getting a truly non-combustible home. And I'm very confident in saying that we are the only ones in the nation who have found a way to do this. And I'm going to keep saying that, frankly, until somebody challenges me,
Right.
and says, no, we found a way to do it. Now, sure, there's a way to do it, and maybe they pay twice as much,
Right. Or more than
but
twice as much.
or more than twice as much, or hey, we're the only ones that are actually doing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can't contradict you because I haven't seen a system that does it either. So
Oh, I love to hear that. Wow. So how is it that the patent pending PHNX beam eliminates the roadblocks so what roadblocks were you encountering, and how does our beam eliminate that?
yeah, so honestly, I think the biggest roadblock to just type 1 construction in general is cost, right? And so it's the beam helps for sure. But I think you have to look at the entire system of the PHNX home that that we're talking about. I mean, the way it's thought through, the components, they kind of complement each other in a way. Like for instance, the beams they can span farther, and we can space them farther apart just because of the nature of the beam itself. But that doesn't help if you use a product like plywood that can't span more than 1.5 feet or 2 feet. So it's really important to pair the beams with a floor system and a roof system that can actually use them to their full potential.
Which is what we do.
Exactly.
Right. And then um so in your mind, as a structural engineer, why do you think nobody's ever thought of this before, this approach?
It's a hard question to answer, I think, but I mean, realistically, I think it's thinking outside the box a little bit, and then also kind of taking advantage of combining these materials together in a way where they can take advantage of each other, and you get a system. It's not just one magic component. I mean, each component is magic in a way on its own, and then when you put them all together, I mean, honestly, I haven't seen a system put together like this one before. This is a new
Oh,
this is a
be
new
still
thing.
my heart. Well, a big part of the structure is are the insulated concrete forms, the ICF walls.
Right.
And I mean, would you be able to, I mean, is there any component in the PHNX home that is, dispensable?
No. I think that's part of the beauty of it is there's nothing wasted, there's nothing extra. Like I mentioned, the beams are designed to span far but be spaced far apart. Therefore, the floor and the roof is designed to span farther. The same thing with the insulated concrete form walls. We want those on the perimeter of the house for their insulation function, but we don't need them on the interior of the house. That's kind of a reason why we want the beams to be able to span all the way across the length of the house from wall to wall. We want to be conscious of how much concrete we're using and how much extra that might be required if we had to, make all the walls out of concrete, for instance, which we don't have to do. The interior non-structural, non-bearing walls can be a light gauge metal frame.
Exactly. And I think that what happens when, I mean, a lot of time, I've been designing ICF homes for over 10 years now, and the constant refrain that I hear from people is, oh, ICF, it's about 30% more than wood. And what yeah, if you basically design the home the same way you would design a wood home,
Right.
and then just substitute ICF walls for the wood walls, then yeah, you're talking about 30% more cost.
Right.
But what we're doing is we're taking those concrete walls. I mean, they're concrete. My gosh. Yes, pair them with our patent pending PHNX beam, and all of a sudden you can span 30 feet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Right. So
Exactly.
why not just use that?
Yeah.
Now, is there, something to that, and this was funny because the first ICF home that I designed, I was really timid about window openings, like, oh, it's concrete, we can't have very big. And luckily the client, they wanted a style of a house that was a little more, a very old looking house is what they wanted.
Yeah.
So they
Modern
wanted more
farmhouse.
farmhouse style, windows and things.
Right.
But what I've learned over the years is, each project that kind of pushed that concrete a little bit more. Is there anything stopping us from having like an 18-foot wide opening,
No.
like a multi-slide panel opening or anything?
No. So in traditional construction, right, when you have a window or a door, you're going to have a header above that window or door that supports the structure above. The concrete can do the same thing. We call it a lintel instead of a header, but basically it's a concrete beam that spans over the opening. So the only, and there's ways around this too, but the only thing that would prevent you from spanning the lintel farther and farther and farther is the depth of the lintel itself. But I mean, we have ways around that as well with the floor system that we have. We can align beams in certain locations and do things to where, it's possible you might not even need a concrete lintel above the opening. So, I mean, we have just a lot of flexibility with this system.
Now, that's something that I didn't even think about because we have this large spacing.
Right.
The 8-foot max spacing. I mean, all of our floors and roofs are basically going to be between 4 and 8-foot spacing on the beams.
Correct.
I think most of the time it's going to be between 6 and 8 feet.
That's
So yeah, if we've got a big window in between there, we might not even need a lintel with all that rebar in it. Oh my gosh.
right.
That's yet another benefit. So let's see. Let's see, other than fires, how do you think a PHNX home would hold up, in earthquakes, tornadoes, floods? What do you think about that?
Well, I would say that modern building codes, they're pretty thorough, and they're designed to be very safe. So no matter what we're designing, we're going to meet the current codes, and so we're going to meet. Basically, it's going to be very safe. Now, the PHNX home is a little different. It has the non-combustible, aspect, right, which is a benefit. But concrete in general has some other benefits besides just, fire resistance. I mean, in my career, we design for earthquakes, right? But I've seen many more homes, especially here in Southern California where we live, lost to fire, not lost to earthquake. So that's I think a big deal related to longevity. But also in addition to fire, water and wind. We're seeing stronger rain events and wind events. And I think, that trend is probably going to continue. And concrete is just naturally more resistant to water and wind. As far as earthquakes, I don't know that there's a big advantage for the system. Like I mentioned, it's got to be designed to the code prescribed loads, the same as any other type of construction. But there's definitely no disadvantage when it comes to seismic.
Yeah,
So
that's a question I get pretty often from people. And, there's certain minimums that you have to design for anyways.
correct.
And right. And even wind and flooding, we can't keep water out of a house,
Right.
but at least with a PHNX home, your house isn't going to wash away.
No, yeah, correct. It won't wash away, and really the structural components aren't really damaged, by water. Wood kind of naturally wicks water into it. I mean, that's honestly how trees survive. It's designed to wick water, right? Whereas concrete, I mean, you dry it out and you're good to go. So that's definitely an advantage.
Yeah, excellent. And just, something that I think because PHNX homes are so easy to design and so easy to build, people tend to think that it's modular. I have to explain that no, every single home is custom designed. Every single home, can you talk a little bit about what the difference, why is it that even though we have these systematic, components and details, we are still able to design unique homes?
Yeah, so modular homes are different where they generally have a component that's set up, and then the way you build the home is you put multiple pieces of that component together, right? This is a different system where we kind of have spans and spacings for the PHNX beam, but you can put those together in any number of different configurations that you can dream up, right? So, you do have a maximum span, but that doesn't mean you can't introduce a new bearing point and then span farther beyond that bearing point. So yeah, the shape and the way that you can combine all the components together, I mean, it's limitless, just the same way traditional construction is limitless. There's no magic number that we have to stick to in any given direction.
Yeah, and so as far as like comparing with standard wood construction, when you consider all the different dimensional lumber, ranging from 2x4 all the way up to 2x12s, 4x14s, 4x16s, and then you've got all the fasteners, the screws, the nails, the plates, the hold downs. Then you've got engineered lumber, you've got the eye joists and all of this.
Mhm.
So looking at all of those different parts and pieces that have to be used in traditional wood construction, how does PHNX compare?
There's so many less components. I mean, it almost doesn't compare in a way. The components are so spread apart and just so simple. The connections are simple. I mean, just the style of construction in general is so different. I mean, it's really apples and oranges. And so, kind of like you mentioned, is people hear about it, and even I had the same thought as cost, right? Well, when you realize that, sure, if you compare a joist or a beam, traditional construction to the Phoenix beam, obviously the Phoenix beam, it costs more, but it can span farther and you can space them farther apart. So you would have maybe only 25% of the number of quote unquote joists with the Phoenix system that you would have with a traditional system. And so that translates into, construction speed, just, ease of construction for, utilities, running utilities, with the large holes that are in the Phoenix beam and the fact that they're spaced so far apart. Running utilities is kind of a no-brainer, on traditional construction, projects. We'll have multiple sets of design meetings with the construction team, the utility installers, and literally brainstorm, how are we going to fit that duct in there with that pipe there? And then you have a waste line coming through. And it's a challenge, with
Yeah,
this
and
system.
all of that stuff is unknown until, like, at what point in the project do you have this discussion?
So we do try to plan for it, obviously, but at the same time, we don't always know the duct size that's going to be there. We can say, okay, yeah, there's going to be a duct and there's going to be a pipe, right? So usually it happens right at the start of construction, or sometimes it doesn't happen until they're out there looking at it and they're going, well, how do we get that there and that there? Which, that's construction delays right there, which is time and money. So yeah, it's kind of a game changer when you can just have the whole space to be able to run whatever you need and not worry about conflicts. It really is.
Right. So that's part of what our goal was in looking at the whole process and streamlining. It's eliminating change orders
Right.
so that, once we have the shell built, like you said, all those tradespeople can go in there and they're just going to fight over who's first. That's all.
Exactly. And
But
honestly,
there's
there's so
plenty
much.
of room for
Yeah,
everybody.
there's so much room. It doesn't matter who's first. And that's funny that you say that, because that's what happens in traditional construction, right? The trade that gets in first wins. It's always somebody else's problem after that. So
Right,
yeah,
right.
that's not an issue here.
Well, cool. So, here's just, in conclusion, so what excites you the most about working with Phoenix?
I guess, it's funny how uh, structural design and construction, the industry in general is very resistant to change, right? You want to use the tried and true materials and methods that literally have been used for century, if not more than centuries. Mainly because you want to make sure it's safe, and you want to use something that the guys in the field know, they're familiar with, that, you know what I mean? There's no surprises. To me, the most interesting thing about the Phoenix system is it's a new take, but it uses, general tried and true materials. We're using concrete and steel and some light gauge studs, and we're just doing it in a completely new way. So I enjoy being a part of the new system, but at the same time, I'm completely confident in the structural integrity. It's great.
Oh my gosh, that's super exciting. And then so to just follow up on that and to close out, um, part of our plan moving forward, hopefully the middle of next year, is to start branching out all over the United States. And obviously, being one builder trying to build homes all over the country, that's pretty difficult, if not impossible, right?
Right, right.
So what the Phoenix goal is to enlist local contractors
Mhm.
all over the country and teach them how to become a Phoenix builder. Give them the tools that
Mhm.
they're going to need to to do what we do, and we would brand them, we would train them. But do you think that's a feasible future for us?
I do, and the main reason why is partly what I was describing. Is it's not, we didn't reinvent concrete or steel or anything. It's materials that they're used to. It's simple connections that they see all the time. It's just a kind of a new spin on those same simple materials and connections. So, I mean, I don't think it would be very, if you find a competent contractor, I don't think it's going to be very difficult at all to kind of get them up to speed on what's required to put together one of these homes. It's pretty straightforward.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's exactly my goal. And the way I describe it, really, it's we opened up the toolbox and we dumped it all out and we just kind of like sort of resorted everything out,
Yeah.
and said, well, we don't need that anymore. We don't need that anymore. You know what? We never used this one. Why don't we use this one more? And then this one works really well together with this one. And so we just
Right.
basically kind of rearranged everything
Yeah.
and clear, trimmed the fat,
Right.
is how I kind of see it.
Yeah, no,
So,
agreed. And it's like I said, each piece is important and complements the other piece, and there's nothing that's wasted, there's no extra.
oh my God. Well, Steve, I just can't tell you how, I mean, I wasn't sure if you were going to say yes, and I was really I just couldn't have been happier when you did say yes, and you've taken us through applying for our patent. So now we are officially patent pending on our beam system. And we should secure that by next year. And I think once we have that patented beam, then we'll be ready to spread out all over the United States and offer the opportunity to become a Phoenix builder to local contractors. And so we empower local small businesses to solve our housing crisis.
Mhm. That's amazing.
It's it's going to be great.
I appreciate you inviting me, to help.
Well, I couldn't think of a better member of the team. So welcome aboard, and thank you so much for your time. I know we're all busy, and to spend this much time and answer some questions, I really appreciate it. So thank you very much, Steve.
Yeah, no problem. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.